A trio of breaking stories tonight. An estimate just out from the Congressional Budget Office on what the House health care reform bill would cost and how many people it would cover. Shocking new evidence tonight that the Obama administration knowingly violated the Constitution by conducting illegal searches against Americans for years. And new information tonight about a terror network behind Monday's deadly bombing in Manchester, England. That is where we begin tonight. Senior correspondent Rick Leventhal has the latest from Manchester. Good evening, Rick.
Good evening, Bret. U.S. defense officials are telling Fox News that the alleged bomber Salman Abedi spent 3 weeks in Libya before returning to England just days before the attack last Friday, carrying a bag with a tag still on it, believed to have held the bomb on Monday night. And there was another raid tonight on a home just outside of Manchester where police took a woman into custody, believed to be connected to Abedi's terror cell. Whoa. Heavily armed British officers raided an apartment building in central Manchester Wednesday afternoon, at one point using a controlled explosion, part of the intense investigation into a possible terror network that supported suicide bomber Salman Abedi. Abedi's older brother was arrested in Manchester, and his younger brother has now been busted in Tripoli, Libya, because of suspected ties to ISIS. Libyan authorities say the bomber's father also arrested for interrogation purposes. Several other suspects have been taken into custody by police, who say Abedi did not act alone.
I think it's very clear that this is a network that we are investigating, and as I've said, it continues at a pace as we speak.
Authorities say it appears Abedi spent at least 3 weeks in Libya before traveling to London, where he spent a couple of days before taking a train to Manchester Monday and detonating a sophisticated improvised explosive device in a foyer of the Manchester Arena as thousands of fans were leaving an Ariana Grande concert. The blast killed 22, including a police officer, and wounded more than 100, 20 of them critically. Charlotte Campbell lost her 15-year-old daughter Olivia in the blast.
Everything, every possible scenario that she's just going to walk through this door any minute like she's not even known what's going on, that she's in a hospital somewhere wanting me, but no one can get hold of me because they don't know who she is, or that she's dead, because I just don't know.
The Prime Minister, Theresa May, raised the threat level from severe to critical and activated almost 1,000 British soldiers to secure and patrol key sites including Houses of Parliament and Buckingham Palace. And a key focus remains finding the bomb maker before another attack can be carried out.
We need to get a better understanding, and whilst we're at critical and there is the possibility of a further attack, we want to be able to support the public as best we can and to protect them as best we can.
And Manchester in mourning tonight, creating this memorial in St. Anne's Square. Thousands of candles and flowers in tribute to the victims, and a steady stream of people have been visiting here all day and all night, determined not to let this attack divide this community. Bret?
Rick Leventhal live in Manchester. Rick, thank you. Now to the other breaking story we told you about at the top of the show. More than 1 in 20 internet searches conducted by the National Security Agency involving Americans during the Obama administration violated constitutional privacy protections. And that practice went on for years. Not only that, but the Obama administration was harshly rebuked by the FISA court for doing it. That's the conclusion from shocking new evidence tonight about what one senator calls an enormous abuse of power. Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen has the story.
On the day President Obama visited Los Angeles last October to yuck it up with Jimmy Kimmel, lawyers for the National Security Agency were quietly informing the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court that NSA had systematically violated the rights of countless Americans, a subject covered ironically on Kimmel's program.
People expect the government to monitor this enough to protect them from bad guys, but they worry that if government is in there too much, then that who's going to protect them from government?
Declassified documents first obtained by the news outlet Circa show the FISA court sharply rebuked the administration. With greater frequency than previously disclosed to the court, NSA analysts had used U.S. person identifiers to query the results of Internet upstream collection, even though NSA's Section 702 minimization procedures prohibited such queries. Minimization refers to the precautions the government is supposed to take to ensure its infringements on Americans' rights are kept to a minimum. The judges blasted NSA's institutional lack of candor and added this is a very serious Fourth Amendment issue. Respect to their protection of U.S. person information. 5 years later, 2 weeks before Election Day, the judges learned that NSA had never adequately enacted the changes it had promised to make. The NSA Inspector General and its Office of Compliance for Operations have been conducting other reviews covering different time periods, the judges noted, with preliminary results suggesting that the problem was widespread during all periods of review.
There's a linear connection between excessive acquisition of data by the intelligence community, distribution of that raw data to people who do not need to know it, emails, texts, and phone calls were the subject of all this, and then ultimately the selective revelation of those names.
Senator Rand Paul called this an amazing abuse of power. A spokesman for former President Obama did not return our request for comment. These disclosures are timely, though, as Section 702 of the FISA Amendments Act, one of the primary means by which U.S. citizens are caught up in incidental surveillance, is up for reauthorization, Bret, by the Congress at year's end.
James, there's some evidence that the FISA court was essentially getting frustrated with the Obama administration.
And running out of patience, yes. The administration was trying to delineate how bad this practice was, what the scope of the non-compliance was. And eventually the FISA court said, no, you're not going to get as much time as you would like. It all stretched out past Inauguration Day, and now the new Attorney General and the new Director of National Intelligence have certified to this court that they've put in different procedures.
Okay, James, thanks. We'll follow this. What do you think should be done about the alleged abuse of power here? And this story, let me know on Twitter at Bret Baier. Use the hashtag Special Report, or on Facebook at facebook.com/BretBaierSR. We are getting a first look tonight from the Congressional Budget Office at a report about what the new Republican health care reform bill would cost and how many people it would cover. Correspondent Peter Ducey is looking it over on Capitol Hill. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Bret. Remember, Republicans had to keep adding amendments to the American Health Care Act to win enough votes so it would pass. And now 20 days later, the Congressional Budget Office has added up the cost of the entire package. And the headline of this report, 23 million fewer people with insurance.
Unless you're a healthy millionaire, Trump care is a nightmare. This report ought to be the final nail in the coffin.
The Congressional Budget Office projects that if the American Health Care Act becomes law, of the 23 million more uninsured than if Obamacare remains in place. But the Budget Office also projects lower premiums and a deficit that's $119 billion lower. So Republicans, who have always been more about access to insurance instead of actual coverage, are claiming victory tonight. Speaker Ryan said, quote, "The CBO report again confirms that the American Health Care Act achieves our mission, lowering premiums and lowering the deficit. Because the deficit doesn't go up, the GOP can continue our mission, lowering premiums and lowering He can continue using something called reconciliation as a vehicle for the bill, which means Democrats can't filibuster, and the bill only needs 51 votes to pass instead of the 60 normally required. But even that may be ambitious. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell tells Reuters today, quote, "I don't know how we get to 50 votes at the moment, but That's the goal. A Fox News poll out tonight shows a 13% jump in voters who think Obamacare is good for the country since October of 2014, but insurance companies don't share the sentiment. Today, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas City said they won't sell or renew any more plans on the Obamacare exchanges, with an official saying, quote, "The uncertain direction of this market is a barrier to our continued participation." Today's long-awaited Congressional Budget Office score will be used to pressure lawmakers who backed the bill, but some Republicans today weren't too concerned, reminding us the CBO score is basically just an educated guess.
It is hard to predict the future, and the CBO tries to do that, but they have historically been off on a number of items.
In the last hour or so, we've seen many more Democrats attacking this report than Republicans celebrating it. But by all indications, when the Senate finally takes it up, they are going to totally rewrite it. That means there will likely have to be another price tag. And that means, Brett, this could be the summer of the CBO.
All right, more on this with the panel. Peter, thank you. On the market today, the Dow gained 74.5. The S&P 500 was up 6. The Nasdaq finished ahead 24. President Trump calls meeting Pope Francis today the honor of a lifetime. The two leaders have often differed on approach and tactics, but correspondent John Roberts is traveling with the president and reports tonight from Brussels, Belgium. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. President Trump has made fighting ISIS and the terrorism it inspires a top priority in his meetings today with the Pope and with NATO leaders here in Brussels, Belgium. Tomorrow, he is seeking a broader coalition.
Become more relevant by taking on a greater counterterrorism mission. Monday's bombing in Manchester has thrust that mission to the top of the agenda.
When you see something like happened 2 days ago, you realize how important it is to win this fight. And we will win this fight. It's a horrible situation, 100%.
Belgium has an enormous problem with ISIS-inspired terrorism. 32 people were killed in the Brussels airport bombing in March of last year. The mastermind of the November 2015 Paris concert massacre had Belgian citizenship. At tomorrow's leaders meeting, President Trump will again stress
the ISIS coalition. We do think that would be a really important step for them to take. They've been an observer, but they've become more and more engaged, in the actual fight to defeat ISIS.
Terrorism was also front and center as President Trump met for the first time with Pope Francis at the Vatican today. The two
been an observer, but they've become
today. The two leaders appeared to get past their sharp exchanges on Twitter and in public statements during last year's campaign, when the Pope suggested anyone who builds walls between people isn't Christian. Meeting later with Italy's Prime Minister Paolo Gentiloni, President Trump proclaimed the papal summit a rousing success.
He is something. He is really great. We had a fantastic meeting and we had a fantastic tour. It was really beautiful.
The president could use a boost from a successful foreign trip. A new Fox News poll shows that bad news back home has torpedoed his approval rating, now at a new low of just 40%, down 5 points from last month. So far, the president appears to have avoided any missteps. His visit with the Pope resulted in broad smiles and warm handshakes, the two leaders exchanging gifts. The Pope gave the president a bronze medallion of an olive branch and 3 of his writings, one about climate change. President Trump gifted 5 first edition volumes of Martin Luther King's writings and a sculpture from a Florida artist titled Rising Above, meant to evoke the promise of peace. As the president departed, it was clear the Pope had told him something that made a real impression.
We still don't know what it is that the Pope told President Trump that he will never forget, but we are trying. In the U.S. election last year. Lieberman, I'm told by a senior White House official,
Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel shows us tonight.
A day after delivering the paperwork on the Trump administration's new blueprint, Budget Director Mick Mulvaney led the charge in defending it. Mulvaney blasted Washingtonese when it comes to these money matters.
In Washington, D.C., if we spent $100 on a program last year and $100 on a program this year, back home we would call that a freeze. In Washington, we call that a cut. If we spent $100 on a program last year and $104 on a program this year, back home we would call that an increase. In Washington, D.C., we call that a cut.
In fact, the Trump budget proposal for this year, 2017, was $4.062 trillion. The president and his team are calling for a spending increase of $32 billion for fiscal year 2018 to $4.094 trillion. And yet Mulvaney has taken some heat.
Will the president's budget mean that Medicaid gets $1.3 trillion less than it would otherwise?
In the CBO baseline score, the answer is yes. It will spend more money every single year over the previous year, with the exception I've mentioned.
Democrats are vowing to protect
$30 trillion in debt, $50 trillion in debt, $100 trillion in debt. What about their stand? Who's going to pay the bill, Congressman? That's what this is all about.
Also today, Secretary Betsy DeVos was on the hot seat about funding reductions at the Department of Education.
The president's fiscal year 2018 budget would reduce overall funding for department programs by $9 billion, or 13%. I've seen the headlines, and I understand
teacher training or in reduced class size.
Adopting a budget is critical because it would be the vehicle allowing Republican leaders to pass tax reform with a simple majority in the Senate. And a number of top Republicans are expressing confidence about getting tax reform done by the end of the year. Bret?
Mike Emanuel live on the Hill. Mike, thank you. The battle lines are coming into clearer focus tonight in the legal fight between President Trump and the Justice Department special counsel over Russia. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is here to tell us where Americans stand on the issue as well.
Entering the president's fifth month in office, new Fox polls show that 7 in 10 Americans approve of the Justice Department decision to appoint a special counsel to the Russia case. And Americans are evenly split on the likely outcome. 43% think the special counsel will find the Trump campaign coordinated with Russia, while 45% disagree. The Senate Intelligence Committee investigation is gaining momentum, issuing 2 more subpoenas for the former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn, who has so far declined to cooperate, with his lawyer claiming constitutional protections cover testimony and records.
It is even more clear that a business does not have a right to take a fifth if it's a corporation.
Pressed by reporters, the senator said they have not ruled out holding Flynn in contempt of Congress.
If, in fact, there's not a response, we'll seek additional counsel advice on how to proceed forward. At the end of that option is a contempt charge, and I've said that everything is on the table.
During his public testimony Tuesday, former CIA Director John Brennan confirmed he initiated the Russia probe by first alerting the FBI last year to intelligence he was tracking.
I was worried by a number of the contacts that the Russians had with U.S. persons, and so therefore I felt as though the FBI investigation was certainly well-founded.
One line of questioning pressed Brennan, an Obama loyalist, on intelligence reports and who identified Americans, including members of the Trump team.
Do you recall any U.S. ambassadors asking that names be unmasked?
I don't know. Maybe it's ringing a vague bell, but I could not answer with any confidence.
On either January 19th or up till noon on January the 20th, did you make any unmasking request?
I do not believe I did.
President Trump has hired a tenacious New York litigator, Mark Kazowitz, to represent him in the special counsel probe led by former FBI Director Robert Mueller, whose team may conduct its first high-profile interview in a matter of days.
James Comey, the fired FBI director, wants to get on the record about his memos documenting conversations with President Trump about the Russia probe. Then Comey is prepared to publicly testify before Congress sometime after.
Demanding higher pay and union rights. More than 24 people were arrested during today's protest. Fox 5 in San Diego with spectacular pictures of Saturday's massive landslide along the covering a third of a mile of the roadway. It's the latest challenge for transportation officials already dealing with the wettest winter in decades. And this is a live look at New York from our affiliate Fox 5. One of the big stories there tonight, the start of Fleet Week. It is the city's time-honored celebration of the sea services. New Yorkers get to interact with sailors, Marines, National Guardsmen, as well as see the latest capabilities of today's forces. The week-long celebration has been held nearly every... Let's talk about the budget battle and the rest of what's going on Capitol Hill, and there's a lot of it. Nebraska Republican Senator Ben Sasse is our guest tonight. Senator, thanks for being here.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
We just had the CBO score, Congressional Budget Office score, of the health care bill that passed the House, and just bullet points: reduces the deficit by $120 billion over 10 years. Insurance markets would be stable. Premiums would increase.
That we're going to need 5 and 10 years from now. And
you're saying it's a full reset and start over from scratch?
I was saying that well before this House bill score came out from CBO today. I haven't read the CBO report this afternoon that just came out, but I've heard those top line numbers you mentioned. But I mean, the reality is Obamacare exacerbated more problems than it mitigated, but it's not sufficient for Republicans to just say what's wrong with Obamacare. We need to.
But do you buy that Republicans now own it because you have the White House, the Senate, and the House?
Obamacare was passed with 60 votes. There's sort of a myth out there that it was passed by budget reconciliation. It wasn't. It was passed before Ted Kennedy died. Then it was modified by reconciliation. So it was modified on a 51 vote basis. We have 52 Republicans. You really need 60 votes to fully repeal and replace Obamacare. And so most of the debates inside the Senate are about how to tweak it and change it. What we really should be having is a debate, and the Democrats should have to come to the table, since they promised a bunch of things on Obamacare that didn't come true. Average family was going to have premiums reduced $2,500. They went up $3,000 a family. We really need a debate about creating a portable health care system. So this has been broken well before the Obamacare fiasco, and now the limited 4 or 5 months that Republicans have had the different branches of government.
Senator Portman said today that he does think at the end of the year, the calendar year, that tax reform is very possible. Do you agree with that? And do you have to do health care before you do tax reform?
You know, sometimes because of budget nerdiness, these two debates are linked together. But no, you don't have to do them in that order. I hope Senator Portman's right, that we can do tax reform. We need to do fundamental tax reform that broadens the base, lowers the rates, carves.
Return now to the Russia investigation. A lot was made, and obviously the Capitol Hill is waiting for Jim Comey to testify publicly. A lot was made of the New York Times report when it first came out of this memo allegedly saying, I hope you can see that President Trump said to him, I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go. He's a good guy. I hope you can let this go. Others point back to testimony that Comey gave later, May 3rd. Take a listen.
Can they halt that FBI investigation?
Not in my experience, because it would be a big deal to tell the FBI to stop doing something that without an appropriate purpose. I'm talking about a situation where we were told to stop something for a political reason. That would be a very big deal. It's not happened in my experience.
Not happened in his experience, he says in that testimony. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we need to have Director and Russian interests aren't aligned. We need to know more about 2016, but more fun. Info-ops. We need to do both things at once.
Do you sense, I hear it in sound bites from Democrats, going from collusion allegations to obstruction of justice focus?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how quickly a lot of folks will try to use any new, sort of instant media soundbite culture to take a 24/7 cycle and immediately have echoes of bad historic catastrophes past. We should let Bob Mueller conduct his investigation in a step-by-step deliberate way. The American people, again, regardless of who you voted for, blue jersey or red jersey in the 2016 cycle, the American people should be comforted that Bob Mueller, who's an adult and a trustworthy public servant, is running that investigation. And I think people shouldn't get out over their skis with all the sound bites.
You obviously were not a vocal fan of candidate Donald Trump. President Donald Trump's on this trip overseas. Your assessment of some of these images and what's coming back from it?
Yeah, so I think one of the things the president is rightly trying to focus attention on is getting to pan-Sunni Arab cooperation against an expansive that become terror training sanctuaries. Iran is the key perpetrator of trying to undermine so many nation states in the Middle East that then become these ungoverned spaces where terrorists plot their future attacks. So I think one of the things the president's right to be doing and his national security team is right to be doing is trying to get a bunch of different Muslim nations who don't believe in killing in the name of religion to ally with us and try to squeeze out these places where the terrorists and the jihadis train.
I want to talk about your book, just out, The Vanishing American place put it. Managers struggle with their young employees' sense of entitlement, a tendency to overshare on social media, and frankness verging on insubordination. Growing up involves coming to recognize the distinction between who we still are today and who we seek to become. Our hope is that our young people will begin to own the Augustinian awareness that not everything we long or lust for is something we should really want. So give me the elevator speech on your book.
Yeah, so we are not celebrating scar tissue with our kids like we need to. We live at the richest time and place in all of human history, and our kids are growing up without a connection to work that almost everybody has always known throughout history. Adolescence is a gift, this sort of protected space where you hit puberty, you hit biological adulthood, and we don't say you immediately have to be a fully economically, emotionally, moral, from the protected dependency of childhood to independent, full flourishing adulthood. But adolescence is supposed to be a means to an end. It's not a destination. Peter Pan is a dystopia. It's a hell. It's not a utopian dream. We don't want our kids stuck in Neverland. We want 10 and 15 and 20 and 25-year-olds to be going through stages of maturation and growth and development. We want them to take the training wheels off. And this book is a constructive project. How should we think about habit formation for our teens and our 20-somethings? It's not at all about politics. But it's not beating anybody up. But if we were going to beat somebody up, it's we, the parents and grandparents, that need to do a better job of celebrating scar tissue with our kids.
Started reading it. It's a fascinating read. Senator, thanks for the time.
Thanks for having me, Bret.
For the first time, we can say confidently that there's been a finding that some of that espionage, that spying on Americans, actually violated the law. So we've gone from something that at the beginning, when Susan Rice first defended herself.
The allegation is that somehow Obama administration officials utilized intelligence for political purposes. That's absolutely false.
To now, yes, we violated those rules, and they disclosed that just days before Trump was elected president.
This is an amazing abuse of power, and it dwarfs any of the other sort of made-up stuff that we're looking into now.
This is a big story. Declassified documents first obtained by the Let's bring in our panel. Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist. A.B. Stoddard, associate editor at Real Clear Politics, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Molly, this has obviously been focusing swirling around on Capitol Hill, but to see the actual FISA court rebuke is pretty stunning.
Yeah, to learn that the Obama administration was routinely violating the privacy protections of Americans, violating their Fourth Amendment rights, is stunning. Were, who was impacted by them, and what is being done to truly correct it, because this was also the kind of thing that they had previously been warned about, and they didn't fix it. They didn't change the oversight, and that is something that can't continue into this administration.
This comes as there's a renewal of the ability to do this.
Right.
And this is a big debate now on Capitol Hill.
Well, it has to become a bigger debate, I think, off of Capitol Hill, because there are two sides to metadata collection and what the NSA does. A lot of people think it's necessary to keep us safe. I don't know if it grew by 3 times the amount of collection. I don't know that many numbers were all for political purposes, but the point is, what's so glaring about the FISA court opinion is it actually says that they never actually adopted the compliance mechanisms that they were required to in 2011. So they were pretending they were complying, but they didn't even put a system in place for the oversight that was required of them. How can that happen?
Unmasking, if you will, and the FISA judges blasting the NSA's institutional lack of candor, adding this is a very serious Fourth Amendment issue. And clearly in these documents, they're frustrated. They're losing patience.
And I think it will cause there to be new institutional safeguards. I think the debate over whether or not to have the metadata, the metadata is sort of over. We had it. We have this tremendous capacity to scoop up the data and to analyze it. The problem is the power it gives the people who scooped it up and the oversight. Now, clearly what we had was a defiance of the courts. I'm worried that it's going to get caught up with pure partisanship. It looks as if it was abused by the Obama administration. What I think we ought to be thinking about is how do you institute new mechanisms that will be adhered to, and oversight perhaps from the Congress, but also from the courts. so that it's not abused in the future. I'm just worried that we're going to be obsessed with who did what to whom when, looking to find scapegoats and to retroactively put the Obama administration on trial. There are probably abuses that ought to be exposed and people punished, but that's not the major issue. The major issue, we're in a new age, we have new capacities. How do you harness it?
But if there's evidence of a political element to this, it changes the dynamic of what we've been covering.
Well, it certainly would, but I do think it is important to think of this as one of the things that came out was that the CIA was responsible for most of the violations. Well, that happened also in the 70s when it came out that the CIA was spying on Americans. We had Church Commission hearings to make sure that we were protecting the rights of Americans, and that does need to happen apart from the political story. Having said that, we did just come out of an administration that does appear to have been engaged in some type of political use of espionage, whether that was dealing with the negotiations on the Iran deal or something to do with the Trump administration. And we do need to get to the bottom of that too. But these are two separate and important issues. But
the Church Commission is a good example of how America, as Americans, we tend to overshoot. It had to be done. It had to be a corrective. There were tremendous abuses. But it's so overshot that according to people who are sort of in the business for several decades, our ability to spy was very much diminished, and we suffered as a consequence.
The president overseas met today with Pope Francis.
Thank you very much. I won't forget what you said.
I won't forget what you said. Everyone's trying to figure out what he said. We don't know as of yet. But you look at these images from this trip so far, AB, and you have the meeting with the Saudis. You have the stop in Israel and the Western Wall and the meeting with the Pope, three major religions, and the images of this trip so far. Your thoughts?
I think it's gone very well for the president, and I think it was very ambitious, high risk but high reward. That bad things could have happened, some stumbles, but they didn't. The planning was done in advance, which is really important, and a lot of people had a lot of doubts about what would be arranged in advance.
To 15.
I think he's really enjoyed the trip. I wouldn't be surprised that he sees it as a success and wants to stay away from the shores and take more trips just like it.
Charles?
Look, I understand the theme of the three great religions, trying to tie them all together to make it look somewhat non-political. But the real story is not the Vatican. It's not even the Israeli trip. It's the real
in Europe than perhaps he got in Israel and Saudi Arabia, but he is going to take this pay your bill message to NATO.
Yeah, one of the more interesting things that came out today was that Donald Trump is actually getting these nations to lay out exactly how they're going to get to their 2% commitment that they've already agreed to do. That's something that not only President Obama didn't get done, but something that presidents going back to Reagan have tried to accomplish and have been unable to accomplish. So we're getting some indication that countries are taking it more seriously, and they should, because if they claim that Russia is such a big threat, they should actually align their budgets and their defense positions to match what they're claiming.
Speaking of budgets and positions, how much will the Republican health care bill cost?
The nonpartisan scorekeepers have spoken loudly and clearly. Trump care means higher costs and less care for the American people. For the good of the country, Republicans in the Senate should reject this path and work with Democrats to fix our health care system instead of pulling the plug on it.
They deserve all the respect in the world, but they're not prophets. I just don't put the same reliance on everything they say is just the way it's going to be. And I say that not having even read the report yet. That's just, I think, an important perspective before we look at it.
Well, talking about the Congressional Budget Office report about the Republicans' health care bill, how it was scored, basically a $120 billion cut to the deficit over 10 years. That's less, and 23 million more people uninsured under this plan. The White House, on background from Brussels, just putting out, history has proven the CBO to be totally incapable of accurately predicting how health care legislation will impact health insurance coverage. What's more alarming is yesterday's HHS report based on data from the Obama administration showing that the average individual market premiums more than doubled since 2013. We must repeal and replace the disastrous Obamacare law with the American Health Care Act, the vehicle which will reform our broken health care system and create one that will help all Americans access quality health care with more choices at lower costs. Okay, back with the panel. AB, fights over CBO, it happens every year. What does this one do politically? As you heard from Senator Sass, they think they're starting from scratch over there in the Senate.
Yeah, the American Health Care Act is not going to pass and be signed into law after it goes to the Senate. It will be unrecognizable. The House Republicans dodged a bullet today because they did not want to take the vote again on the House floor, where they could have lost a few members.
Just to get wonky,
it won by 2. Well, I didn't want to get too in the weeds.
I'll just quickly say they had to make sure that it reduced the deficit in order to go through the process called reconciliation, which enables them to do the vote in the Senate with 51 votes. If it didn't reduce the deficit, the House would have had to vote again.
Right. So that would have been a nightmare because they could have, after a few angry town halls, really lost the 2 votes that it won by. So that is a big relief. That's a win. House Republicans are very relieved these days. It is no longer in their lap. They are watching the Senate have to scramble to try to get something out. They're telling their friends on the Senate side, don't wait, don't let it linger. Do it as soon as you can. And the Senate, as everyone has said for months, is not going to pass a bill that would be something that the House Freedom Caucus conservatives in the House would vote for. They're hoping to get a moderate bill out and have the moderates in the House, maybe even a few Democrats, get it to the president's desk. That said, the majority leader, Mitch McConnell, today said he doesn't know how to get to 50 votes. It is a very, very tough battle in the Senate, even if the bill pushes off to the left.
Chad Pergram just put in that Speaker Ryan said, "I feel good, it's great," about this report.
Yeah, because it's out of his shop. He now can go and play golf until the Senate deals with it. Look, I'm unimpressed by the CBO and the sanctity of CBO numbers, apart from the fact that they got it wrong by a lot last time. Of course you're going to get an increase in the number of uninsured when you abolish the provision that requires people, especially young people who are compelled to buy health insurance, that abolishes the compulsion to buy health insurance that's completely uneconomical and unnecessary. So if you abolish that compulsion, you're going to get fewer people who purchase health insurance. That isn't a calamity. That's a rational economic decision. And second, the major expansion of the coverage was from the lifting of the Medicare, of the Medicaid cap. Medicaid was intended to cover the poor. The Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare, raised that to 400% of the poverty level. Why is that a sacred number? If you reduce it to 200%, you're not even talking about the poor here. This is into the middle class. There's a huge expansion of entitlements in a country that thinks of itself as serious, says that everybody says we have to have entitlement reform, and the minute you do something that actually acts on that, you get screeches of horror like from Chuck Schumer and accusations of cruelty.
Molly, we spent a lot of time talking about this health care bill. Just perspective, obviously most of America gets their health insurance through their employer or from the government in Medicaid, Medicare. The percentage, I think, is about 6 or 7% of the country, and that is what this bill is really about.
Right, and it also, as Senator Sass just talked about earlier in the show, the main problems that we have are with these ties of health insurance to jobs, and until that type of thing is fixed, we will continue to have the sort of structural problems in our health care bills.
So do they get something done? Do they start? I mean, how does this work?
I think that both House and Senate Democrats would be unwise to not realize how frustrated people are with how many times they have sent them to the Hill to fix things, and that if they don't fix something, I don't think people will be very patient here.
Okay, let's listen to Mick Mulvaney pitching the budget up on the Hill.
What we've been doing for too long, both parties, by the way, in this city, have been taking money from people without laying out a plan for how we're ever going to pay it back. And we start doing that with this budget. This budget does balance within the 10-year window, something that is completely new in this town. But I was excited to be able to keep the president's promise. By the way, the budget is nothing more than a collection of his promises. That's how we wrote it.
We're going to reject this morally bankrupt budget, and we will resist it here in Congress, but most importantly, in the streets of America.
Even Republicans know this is a bad budget that has no chance of being enacted. But what an awful place to start the debate.
It is shameful. It is immoral. It is indecent. Tear this thing up. Tear this thing up. Tear up this budget.
Strong letter to follow. AB, every budget essentially doesn't go anywhere up on Capitol Hill immediately. It starts the process, just to put that in perspective. But what about this budget and how it's being received?
Right. Well, you never have to listen to the Democrats. I say that often here. Just